For 3 centuries, humanity proved we could be civilized. Then the galaxy threatened our children, and we showed them why our ancestors conquered a world of predators, with nothing but sharp rocks and sharper minds. The holographic projection flickered to life in the center of Earth's United Defense Command, casting an eerie blue glow across the faces of humanity's last hope. Ambassador Chen stood perfectly still as the 3-dimensional images of the Galactic Council materialized before her. 27 species, each more alien than the last, stared down with expressions that ranged from pity to contempt. The Jothic Prime Speaker's translator crackled to life, its voice a mechanical approximation of diplomacy. Humanity of Earth. You have been summoned before this council to answer for your continued existence in violation of Protocol 793. Your species has been deemed incompatible with civilized space. Ambassador Chen felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her composure. 300 years of first contact protocols, of bending over backward to prove humanity's worth, of swallowing pride and accepting every slight and insult with grace. All of it was about to come to an end. She could feel it in the cold stares of beings who had already made their decision. We have reviewed your petition, continued the Quilati representative, its crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow shards. The Council finds that humanity's aggressive tendencies, territorial nature, and historical record of internal conflict make you unsuitable for integration into the greater galactic community. You will surrender your colonies, dismantle your military vessels, and accept quarantine to your home system. You have 72 Earth hours to comply. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of the projection equipment. Ambassador Chen looked at each council member in turn, her dark eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars visible through the observation windows behind her. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost conversational. Do you know what we call ourselves in our oldest languages? We call ourselves the wise ones. Homo sapiens. It's quite ironic, isn't it? She paused, letting the translation algorithms catch up. For 3 centuries, we've proven our wisdom by choosing peace when we could have chosen war. We've accepted your restrictions, your insults, your protocols that seem to apply only to us. We've watched you divide our colonies among yourselves like spoils of war. And we've smiled and nodded because we believed in the promise of galactic brotherhood. The Jothic Prime Speaker's tentacles rippled with what might have been impatience. Your protests are noted but irrelevant. The decision is— I'm not protesting, Chen interrupted, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. I'm explaining. You've made your decision based on who you think we are. You've studied our history, our wars, our conflicts, and you've concluded that we're too dangerous, too violent, too aggressive for your peaceful galaxy. She stepped closer to the holographic projection, her face now illuminated by its blue light. But you've made a critical miscalculation. You've mistaken our choice for peace as our only nature. A murmur rippled through the council members. The Threnody ambassador, a being of pure thought inhabiting a mechanical shell, spoke for the first time. You threaten the council? This confirms our assessment. No, Chen replied. And now there was something new in her voice, something ancient and cold that made several council members shift uncomfortably. I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. There's a difference, and you're about to learn it. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small data chip, holding it up for all to see. This contains humanity's official response to your ultimatum. I'm uploading it now to the Council's database. In 72 hours, you'll understand exactly what you've done. You wanted to see the other side of humanity, the side we've been hiding because we chose to be civilized? Her smile was thin and sharp. Congratulations, Council. You're about to get your wish. The hologram flickered and died, leaving Ambassador Chen alone in the darkness of the command center. Behind her, Admiral Okonkwo stepped forward from the shadows, his weathered face grim. Are we really doing this, Ambassador? Chen turned to face him, and in her eyes was the reflection of a species that had clawed its way from the caves to the stars, that had survived ice ages and plagues, world wars and near extinctions, always adapting, always surviving, always remembering. Send the message, Admiral. All channels, all colonies, all defense fleets. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tell them we tried it their way. Now we do it ours. Deep beneath the Lunar Command Complex, in a vault that hadn't been opened in 200 years, Dr. Sarah Volkova stood before a massive blast door, Her hand trembled slightly as she entered the authorization codes that had been passed down through 7 generations of military historians. The door's ancient mechanisms groaned to life, and she found herself wondering if the galaxy truly understood what it was asking for. The archives of war, that's what they called it. When humanity had joined the galactic community, part of the integration protocol had required the surrender of all weapons of mass destruction and the documentation of humanity's martial history. But Earth's leaders had been clever. They'd surrendered the weapons, yes, but they'd kept the knowledge. More importantly, they'd kept the capacity to remember what humanity was capable of when survival was the only law that mattered. Dr. Volkova walked through rows of servers, each one containing terabytes of data that the Galactic Council had dismissed as primitive barbarism. Sun Tzu's Art of War, Clausewitz's On War, every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine, every lesson learned in blood across 10,000 years of human conflict. The Council had seen these records and concluded that humanity was too violent for civilized space. They had never considered that violence could be a tool, refined and perfected, waiting in storage for the moment it might be needed. Her communicator chimed. Dr. Volkova, we have the updated intelligence from the observation posts. The Jathic Third Fleet has begun repositioning toward human colonies as expected. They're not even trying to hide it. She pulled up the tactical display on her wrist unit. 17 Galactic Council fleets were moving into position around human space, confident in their technological superiority, secure in their billion-year-old doctrines of warfare. Warfare that, in the galactic community, was ritualized, predictable, almost ceremonial. Wars were fought with honor, with agreed-upon rules, with respect for the sanctity of civilian populations and cultural sites. A bitter smile crossed her face. Upload package Omega to all fleet commanders. Authorization Volkova 77 Kilo. Ma'am, her assistant hesitated. Omega includes everything. The cyber warfare protocols, the psychological operations manuals, the scorched earth contingencies. Are we sure we want to? The Council made their choice, Volkova interrupted. They want to see what humanity looks like when we stop playing by their rules. Let's show them exactly what 300 years of enforced peace has given us. 300 years to study their weaknesses, to understand their military doctrine, to prepare for this exact moment. She moved to the central terminal and pulled up a file marked Project Cassandra. It had been started almost immediately after first contact, a just-in-case scenario that military planners had hoped would never be needed. While humanity had publicly embraced peace, a small cadre of strategists had been quietly analyzing every aspect of Galactic Council military operations, identifying vulnerabilities, developing countermeasures, and designing weapon systems that would exploit the Council's complacent superiority. The galaxy's elder races had spent 1,000,000 years perfecting the art of civilized warfare. Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of survival warfare. The two were about to collide. Send this message to all colonial governors, Volkova commanded, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to unleash. Operation Prometheus is go. All civilian populations are to be evacuated to designated safe zones. All research facilities are to implement scorched earth protocols. No technology, no data, nothing falls into Council hands intact. She pulled up another file, this one containing psychological profiles of each Council species. The Jathic were rigid thinkers, unable to adapt when their careful plans fell apart. The Kolathi were energy-based beings vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. The Threnodi relied so heavily on their AI systems that they'd forgotten how to fight without them. For 300 years, humanity had smiled and nodded and learned, always learning, always filing away information for a day they hoped would never come. That day had arrived. Dr. Volkova, came another voice over the comm system. This one belonged to Admiral Okonkwo himself. The Council is broadcasting threats across all channels. They're demanding immediate surrender of our colonial holdings. They've given us 48 hours now, moved up their timeline. Let them demand, Volkova replied. Have the fleet commanders received their packages? They have. And ma'am, they're ready. Some of them have been ready for decades. The younger officers think this is madness, but the older ones, the ones who remember what we gave up to join the Council, they understand what's at stake. Volkova closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of all the human colonies spread across 36 star systems, Families who had never known war, children who had grown up believing that peace was the only way. She was about to shatter that illusion. But if she didn't, those colonies would be dismantled. Those families scattered to the solar winds, humanity reduced to a single system, trapped and slowly suffocating. Inform the fleet commanders that Rules of Engagement Package Delta is in effect. We're not the aggressors here. The Council moved their fleets first. But once we engage, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Once we engage, we show them what humanity has spent 3 centuries trying to forget. We show them why our ancestors painted themselves in the blood of their enemies. We show them why every predator on Earth learned to fear the bipedal apes with the clever hands and the long memories. Understood, Doctor. God help us all. God? Volkova laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Council's elder races think they're gods. We're about to remind them that gods can bleed. She turned back to the archives, pulling up one final file. It was a collection of human war quotes gathered from every era and culture. She selected one and uploaded it to be broadcast on all galactic channels in 72 hours. Time to coincide with the Council's deadline. The quote was from William Tecumseh Sherman, a general from Earth's American Civil War. War is cruelty. There is no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been reformed by choice, not by nature, and that choice was being revoked. Captain Maria Santos had been born on Proxima Station, humanity's first extrasolar colony. She had never set foot on Earth, but she carried its legacy in her blood and its history in her training. Now as she sat in the command chair of the UNS Indomitable, a stealth corvette that technically didn't exist according to the Galactic Registry, she felt the weight of that legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Captain, we have confirmation. Jothic 3rd Fleet, 17 heavy cruisers and 43 support vessels are entering the New Hebrides system. They're broadcasting demands for the colonial government to surrender. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Chen, no relation to the ambassador, kept his voice professionally neutral. But Santos could hear the tension underneath. She studied the holographic display floating before her command chair. The Jothic fleet moved in perfect formation, a testament to 1,000,000 years of military tradition. Beautiful, really. Precise, predictable, like watching a classical ballet where every step had been choreographed eons ago. How long until they reach firing range of the colony? 4 hours at their current speed, Captain. Santos allowed herself a thin smile. The Jothic moved slowly, deliberately, giving their enemies time to see their doom approaching, time to contemplate surrender. It was psychological warfare from an era when warfare was about intimidation as much as firepower. They had no idea that humanity had refined psychological warfare into an art form by the 21st century. Communications. Patch me through to Admiral Okonkwo. Secure channel. The Admiral's face appeared on her private screen, his expression grave. Captain Santos, you have your target? Yes, sir. The Jothic 3rd Fleet is moving exactly as Project Cassandra predicted. They're following their doctrine to the letter. Intimidation formation, slow approach, maximum visibility. And our assets? Santos glanced at her tactical display. Scattered across the New Hebrides system were 17 mines that looked like nothing more than space debris to conventional sensors. Each one had been positioned over the past 6 months by seemingly civilian mining vessels, each one containing enough antimatter to crack a heavy cruiser's hull. But the mines were just the opening act. All assets in position, sir. We have 3 corvettes in the system, all running dark. The Jothic can't see us. Their sensors are optimized for large-scale fleet actions, not stealth operations. They're not even looking for us. That's because they don't think they need to, Okonkwo replied. Remember, Captain, we're not trying to win a stand-up fight. We're making a statement. We're showing them that their billion-year-old playbook doesn't account for an enemy that refuses to fight fair. Santos felt a moment of doubt. Fair. The word seemed to echo in her mind. Was any of this fair? The Council was, in their view, simply enforcing their laws. But then she thought of the families on New Hebrides, of the children who played in the domed gardens, of the life humanity had built in the stars despite every obstacle the Council had placed in their way. Fair was a luxury for species who weren't facing extinction. Captain? Her XO's voice pulled her back to the present. The Jothic are increasing speed. They're no longer following standard intimidation protocol. Santos checked her displays. The lead elements of the Jothic fleet were accelerating, breaking formation slightly. They're getting impatient. They expected us to surrender by now. Or they received intelligence that we're planning something, Lieutenant Chen suggested. Doesn't matter, Santos decided. We're committed. Weapons, how long until the lead cruisers reach the minefield? 17 minutes, Captain. She took a deep breath, thinking of all the training simulations, all the historical battles she'd studied. The Battle of Midway, where American forces had caught Japanese carriers vulnerable and turned the tide of a war. The Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal had encircled and destroyed a Roman army twice his size. Humanity's history was full of underdogs who had refused to lose, who had found ways to turn weakness into strength. All ships. This is Santos. Silent running protocols remain in effect. When the mines blow, we go active and launch the drones. Remember, we're not here to destroy the fleet, we're here to terrify them. We want survivors. We want them to report back to the Council exactly what happens when humanity stops pulling its punches. Acknowledgements flickered across her screen. 3 ships, 78 crew members total, about to take on a fleet that outmassed them 1,000 to 1. The odds would have been considered suicide by any reasonable military doctrine. But then, humanity had stopped being reasonable the moment the Council had threatened their survival. 10 minutes, her tactical officer reported. Santos pulled up the tactical overview. The Jothic fleet was almost beautiful in its precision. 17 heavy cruisers arrayed in a formation that had been perfected over eons, each one positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, to protect its neighbors, to present an unstoppable wall of force. The formation was designed to be impressive, terrifying, overwhelming. It was also designed for an enemy that would meet them head-on, that would fight with honor, that would respect the ancient protocols of civilized warfare. Humanity was about to teach them a hard lesson about uncivilized warfare. 5 minutes. Captain, the lead cruiser is hailing New Hebrides colony. They're demanding immediate surrender and disarmament. Let them talk, Santos said quietly. Colonial Governor Martinez knows the plan. He'll stall as long as possible. She watched the countdown timer tick down, each second an eternity. In her mind, she ran through everything that could go wrong. The mines might not work, antimatter containment was tricky. The Jothic might detect her ships. Their sensors were old but not obsolete. The drones might malfunction. They'd been built in secret without proper testing protocols. 1,000 things could go wrong, but only one thing had to go right. 1 minute, Lieutenant Chen's voice was barely a whisper. The Jothic fleet continued its stately advance, confident in their superiority and their technology, in their billion-year dominance of the galaxy. The lead cruiser was close enough now that Santos could make out individual details on her tactical screen. The decorative hull patterns that marked it as a flagship, the ceremonial weapons ports that were more for show than function, the command spire that rose from its center like a monument to Jothic glory. 30 seconds. Santos gripped her command chair's armrests, her knuckles white. This was it. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity would survive as a free species or spend eternity caged in their home system. This was the moment that 300 years of patient diplomacy came to an end, and 300,000 years of human survival instinct took over. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mines active. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The Jothic fleet continued forward, majestic and unstoppable. Then space itself seemed to tear apart. The first antimatter mine detonated directly beneath the lead cruiser's belly, where its shields were weakest. The Jothic had never needed strong ventral shields in a million years of civilized warfare. No one had thought to attack from below. The explosion tore through the cruiser's hull like tissue paper, vaporizing half the ship in an instant and sending the rest tumbling end over end, atmosphere and debris streaming from its broken hull. But that was just the beginning. The mines had been positioned not just to destroy but to create chaos. As the other cruisers tried to respond, tried to activate emergency protocols and bring their shields to full power, they triggered more mines. Explosions rippled through the formation, each one calculated to cause maximum disruption without necessarily destroying every ship. Now, Santos barked, all ships go active. Launch the drones. The UNS Indomitable dropped its stealth field and lit up its engines, accelerating toward the confused Jothic fleet at velocities that would have seemed suicidal to any sane commander. But Santos wasn't trying to ram them. She was delivering her payload. Thousands of drones erupted from her ship's launch tubes, each one no larger than a briefcase, each one carrying a simple but devastating payload. The Jathic point defense system, still reeling from the mine strikes, tried to track the incoming swarm and failed. There were too many targets, moving too erratically, using flight patterns that violated every principle of sensible navigation. Because they weren't sensible. They were human. The drones swarmed over the Jathic cruisers like angry hornets, attaching themselves to hull plating, weapons mounts, sensor arrays, and engine nacelles. Then they released their payload, not explosives but something worse. Each drone carried a package of nanomachines programmed with one simple instruction: corrupt, confuse, and disable. Captain. Lieutenant Chen's voice was excited now. The drones are working. The lead cruisers are reporting complete systems failures. Their navigational computers are shutting down. Weapon systems are offline. They're dead in space. Santos watched as the once mighty Jathic fleet floundered like fish out of water. Without their computer systems, the ships were little more than metal coffins floating in space. They had shields but couldn't direct them. They had weapons but couldn't aim them. They had engines but couldn't navigate. Communications broadcast on all channels. Make sure every ship in that fleet hears this. She waited for the confirmation, then spoke clearly and deliberately, knowing that her words would be carried back to the Galactic Council, knowing that this message would echo across the galaxy. Jathic Third Fleet, this is Captain Maria Santos of the United Nations ship Indomitable. You came to my home system with threats and demands. You came expecting us to surrender, to roll over and accept extinction like obedient pets. You came thinking that 300 years of peace had made us weak, had made us forget who we are and what we're capable of. She paused, watching as the disabled Jathic cruisers tried desperately to restore their systems, to regain control, to understand what had just happened to them. You were wrong. We chose peace because we wanted it, not because we needed it. We've been studying you for 3 centuries. We know your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. We know that your ships are masterpieces of art and engineering, beautiful and perfect and completely unprepared for an enemy that doesn't share your sense of honor. Another pause. In her peripheral vision, she could see her crew watching her, waiting for what came next. Your disabled vessels will not be destroyed. We're going to let you sit there helpless while we broadcast this message across the galaxy. We want the Galactic Council to see what happened here. We want every species in known space to understand that humanity tried your way, and you repaid our patience with threats of extinction. So now you get our way. She leaned forward in her command chair, her voice dropping to something cold and hard. Tell the Council this. They have 60 hours to withdraw all fleets from human space and rescind their ultimatum. If they don't, what happened here will seem merciful in comparison. We didn't survive ice ages and plagues and world wars by being civilized. We survived by being adaptable, by being ruthless, by doing whatever it took to see another sunrise. The galaxy wanted to see the other side of humanity? This is just a preview. Santos cut the transmission and sat back, suddenly exhausted. Around her, the bridge crew was silent, processing what had just happened, what they had just unleashed. Captain, her XO said quietly, we just declared war on the entire Galactic Council. They outnumber us 1,000,000,000. Santos looked at the tactical display, at the crippled Jathic fleet, at the stars beyond that held countless worlds and species who thought humanity was weak. They outnumber us, she agreed, but we only need to win once. They need to win every time. And that, Lieutenant, is the difference between a civilization that evolved in peace and a species that evolved in chaos. They're playing a game. We're fighting for survival. She turned to her communications officer. Send our tactical data to Admiral Okonkwo. Then get us out of here. We have a war to win. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Holographic projections of council members flickered and overlapped as every species tried to speak at once, their translators creating a cacophony of competing voices. At the center of it all, the Jathic Prime Speaker stood in uncharacteristic silence, its tentacles drooping in what could only be described as shock. Ambassador Tekrel of the Kulathi finally managed to restore order by overriding all other communications channels. Her crystalline form pulsed with angry red light. Silence. We must approach this situation with reason, not panic. Reason? The Threnody ambassador's mechanical voice was sharp with disbelief. The humans have just crippled an entire fleet without firing a shot. They've violated every protocol of civilized warfare. They've done more than that, interjected the Vraxi representative. a being whose species had served as the Council's military strategists for 1,000,000 years. He pulled up tactical recordings of the battle, if it could even be called a battle, at New Hebrides. Look at this. Mines disguised as debris, stealth vessels that we couldn't detect, weapons that corrupt our computer systems. They've been preparing for this. They've been preparing for 300 years. The chamber fell silent as the recording played. Council members watched in growing horror as the proud Jothic Third Fleet was reduced to floating junk in a matter of minutes. What disturbed them most wasn't the effectiveness of the attack. It was the philosophy behind it. This wasn't warfare as they knew it. There were no warnings, no challenges, no opportunity for honorable surrender. The humans had simply struck from the shadows and disappeared. "It's barbaric," whispered the Lumina representative, a species known for their devotion to peaceful resolution. They attacked without declaration, without giving the Jothic a chance to defend themselves. "They gave us 3 centuries to defend ourselves," came a new voice. The entire council turned to see Ambassador Chen's holographic form materializing in the chamber. She shouldn't have been able to access the emergency session, but clearly humanity's technological capabilities had been underestimated in more ways than one. "You just weren't paying attention. You dare interrupt a closed council session?" The Jothic Prime Speaker's translator crackled with rage. "This is another violation of protocols that you were about to use as justification to genocide my species?" Chen interrupted, her voice cutting through the chamber like ice. "Let's dispense with the pretense, shall we? You were going to quarantine humanity to our home system, which every analysis shows would lead to our extinction within 5 generations. You called it protocol. We call it a death sentence. We offered you a place in the civilized galaxy," Tekrell protested. "We asked only that you surrender your aggressive tendencies, your weapons, our right to exist as equals," Chen finished. "You asked us to become pets, to be grateful for whatever scraps of space you decided to allow us. And when we dared to want more, when we dared to establish colonies and build a future for our children, you decided we needed to be put down like dangerous animals." She stepped closer to the center of the chamber, her holographic form solid and unwavering. "Let me tell you what happened at New Hebrides. We didn't attack the Jothic Third Fleet. They attacked us. They entered our sovereign system with weapons armed and demands for surrender. We simply defended ourselves, and we used methods that your billion-year-old playbook doesn't account for because you've forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. This is sophistry." The Threnody ambassador's voice rose. "You disabled our ships with nanomachine weapons, weapons that violate the protocols of civilized warfare." "Your protocols," Chen corrected, "not ours. We never agreed to fight by your rules. We agreed to exist peacefully, and we kept that agreement for 300 years. You're the ones who broke it. You're the ones who moved military fleets into position around our colonies. You're the ones who issued an ultimatum. We just responded in a language you seem to understand: force." The Vraxi military strategist studied Chen's hologram with what might have been respect. "You've been planning this. Everything you've done for 3 centuries, the peaceful negotiations, the technology exchanges, the cultural programs, it was all preparation for this moment." Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We've been preparing for every moment. That's what humanity does. We adapt, we learn, we prepare for contingencies. We hoped this moment would never come. We genuinely wanted peace, but we're not stupid enough to rely solely on hope." She pulled up holographic displays of her own, showing the movement of Council fleets around human space over the past week. "You've been positioning forces for a coordinated strike on all our colonies simultaneously. Did you think we wouldn't notice? Did you think we'd just watch while you prepared to erase us from the galaxy?" The chamber erupted in denials and accusations, but Chen's evidence was damning. 17 separate Council fleets from a dozen different species, all converging on human space in a clear pattern of encirclement. The claim that this was just standard security positioning fooled no one. "So what do you want, human?" The Jothic Prime Speaker's voice had changed from rage to something more calculating. "Are you here to issue your own ultimatum?" "No," Chen replied. "I'm here to explain the new reality. You wanted to force humanity into a box, to limit us to one system to control our future. That's no longer possible. What happened at New Hebrides is happening at 7 other locations right now. Every Council fleet that moves against us will face the same fate. Not destruction, not death, but humiliation. We'll disable your ships and broadcast it across the galaxy. We'll show every species in known space that the mighty Galactic Council can be beaten by a species you deem too primitive to matter. You're declaring war on the entire council? Tikrell's crystalline form flickered with disbelief. You must know you cannot win. Even with your tactics, our combined forces number in the millions of vessels. You have what, a few thousand? We don't need to win, Chen explained patiently. We just need to survive, and we need to hurt you badly enough that you decide coexistence is preferable to continued conflict. You see, that's another thing you've forgotten in your million years of civilized warfare. Sometimes it's not about winning. Sometimes it's about making victory too expensive to pursue. She changed the display to show casualty projections, economic impact assessments, and sociological disruption analyses. We've modeled this. Every engagement costs you prestige, causes dissent within the council, forces member species to commit resources to a war that most of them don't want. You're a coalition, which means you're only as strong as your weakest link. How many member species will continue supporting this war when their ships are disabled, their crews humiliated, their technology proven inferior to a species they've spent 3 centuries dismissing as primitives? The Lumina representative spoke up, her voice trembling. You're talking about destabilizing the entire Galactic Council. The peace we've built over millions of years is built on the subjugation of species that don't fit your definition of civilized, Chen shot back. How many other species have you quarantined? How many have been forced to surrender their sovereignty, their destiny, their future because they didn't match your protocols? We're not fighting to destroy the Council. We're fighting to force it to change, to accept that there's more than one path to civilization. The Vraxi military strategist leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. And if we refuse? If we commit everything to crushing humanity, consequences be damned. Chen's expression hardened. Then you'll learn why humanity spent 10,000 years developing increasingly efficient ways to kill each other. The tactics we used at New Hebrides were merciful. We disabled your ships without killing your crews. We gave you a chance to retreat with your lives, if not your dignity. But if you force us to truly unleash what we're capable of— She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Let's just say that we have a saying. War is hell. You've never experienced hell. We've lived in it for our entire existence as a species. She pulled up one final display, this one showing historical human conflicts, the world wars, the nuclear standoffs, the cyber warfare campaigns, the biological weapon treaties that existed specifically because humanity had proven too effective at creating plagues. The council members watched in growing horror as the true scope of human martial history unfolded before them. This is monstrous, whispered the Lumina representative. How did your species survive this? By learning from it, Chen replied simply. Every war taught us something. Every conflict made us better at preventing the next one, or winning it if prevention failed. You want to know our greatest strength? It's not our technology or our tactics. It's our capacity to learn, to adapt, to take the lessons of our darkest moments and transform them into tools for survival. The Jothic Prime Speaker was silent for a long moment before speaking. What are your terms? Withdraw all fleets from human space within 48 hours. Rescind the quarantine order. Recognize human sovereignty over our established colonies. And most importantly, revise the Council's protocols to allow for different approaches to civilization. You don't have to like us, but you have to accept that we have the right to exist on our own terms. And if we agree to this, Tikrell asked, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't continue to expand aggressively, that you won't turn these weapons against us? Chen smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. The same guarantee we had for 300 years, our word. We chose peace once, and we'll choose it again if you give us the chance. But it has to be peace as equals, not peace as prisoners. You need to understand something fundamental about humanity. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to live in it. Give us that, and you'll find us the most loyal allies you could ask for. Deny us that, and you'll find us the most persistent enemies you've ever faced. The chamber fell silent as the council members contemplated their options. Finally, the Vraxi strategist spoke. I recommend we accept these terms. Not because humanity has proven militarily superior, they haven't, but because they've proven something more dangerous. They've proven they're willing to pay any price for survival. A species like that cannot be caged. It can only be befriended or destroyed, and destruction would cost us more than I believe this council is willing to pay. One by one, the council members indicated their reluctant agreement. The Jothic Prime Speaker's tentacles rippled with what might have been resignation. Very well. We accept your terms, Ambassador Chen. But know this. There are species in this galaxy far older and far more powerful than those represented on this council. You may have won today, but you've also announced your presence to forces that make our fleets look insignificant. We'll deal with those forces when we meet them, Chen replied, just like we've dealt with every other challenge in our history. One crisis at a time, one victory at a time, one survival at a time. It's the human way. Her hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate the uncomfortable truth that their million-year-old civilization had just been outmaneuvered by a species that had only reached the stars 500 years ago, 6 months after the Battle of New Hebrides, though historians would later argue whether it deserved to be called a battle. Humanity found itself in an unusual position. They had won a war without fighting it, or rather, had fought it so effectively that full-scale conflict became unnecessary. But victory, as Admiral Okonkwo was learning, came with its own complications. He stood in the observation deck of the newly commissioned UNS Sentinel, watching the construction of humanity's first major military shipyard in the Tau Ceti system. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd fought for the right to exist peacefully, and the first thing they'd done was build enough ships to ensure no one would threaten that peace again. Admiral, we have representatives from the Vraxi Collective requesting permission to dock. His aide, Lieutenant Sharma, looked uncomfortable with the request. They say they want to discuss mutual defense cooperation. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. The Vraxi had been the Council's premier military advisors for 1,000,000 years. That they were coming hat in hand to learn from humanity was a shift that still felt surreal. Grant them permission. And contact Ambassador Chen. She'll want to be part of this conversation. As he made his way to the diplomatic suite, Okonkwo reflected on how quickly the galaxy had changed. The Council's ultimatum had been withdrawn, yes, but the damage to their authority had been more severe than anyone had predicted. 3 member species had already left the Council, declaring that if it couldn't protect them from a species as primitive as humanity, what was the point? 2 others were demanding major reforms. The million-year-old power structure was fracturing, and humanity stood at the center of the earthquake. Ambassador Chen was already in the diplomatic suite when he arrived, studying data tablets with her characteristic intensity. She looked up as he entered. Admiral, I assume you've heard the latest? About the Vraxi wanting to talk cooperation? Yes, what do you think they really want? Chen smiled grimly. What everyone wants these days, insurance. The Kulathi Confederacy is making territorial demands that the Council can't enforce. The Threnodi are threatening to withhold their computational services unless they get better representation. Half the galaxy is realizing that the old order is dying, and they're all scrambling to figure out where they'll stand in the new one. And they think cozying up to humanity will help? We proved something that scared them more than our weapons, Admiral. We proved that a young, aggressive species with adaptive thinking can outmaneuver ancient civilizations with all their wisdom and technology. Now everyone's wondering who the next humanity will be. Some of them want to partner with us to stay ahead. Others want to learn our methods to use against their own rivals. The door chimed, and 3 Vraxi military commanders entered, their exoskeletons gleaming with ceremonial decorations that represented hundreds of thousands of years of service. The lead commander, whose translator identified him as Fleet Coordinator Zekthal, bowed in the formal Vraxi greeting. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Okonkwo, we come to you with a proposal that would have been unthinkable a year ago. But these are unprecedented times. Please sit. Chen gestured to the seats designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. Or stand if you prefer. What brings the Vraxi to our doorstep? Zekthal's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment. Honesty, we hope. The Galactic Council has relied on Vraxi's strategic analysis for eons, but recent events have revealed gaps in our understanding. Your species has demonstrated tactical and strategic thinking that falls outside our established models. We wish to learn from you and in exchange offer our own accumulated knowledge. Okonkwo leaned forward. You want us to teach you how to fight dirty. We want you to teach us how to fight creatively, Zekthal corrected. Our models are built on billions of simulations, millions of actual conflicts all analyzed and optimized. But they're all based on the assumption that warfare follows certain rational patterns. Your species doesn't. We're irrational. Chen's tone was dangerous. No. Zekthal's translator conveyed something that might have been respect. You're adaptive in ways we've forgotten. You see warfare not as a system to be optimized, but as a problem to be solved with whatever tools are available. When we studied your military history, we found something disturbing. You rarely fight the same way twice. Every conflict teaches you something, and you immediately incorporate those lessons. It's chaotic, but effective. Chen and Okonkwo exchanged glances. This was the conversation they'd been expecting, but it was happening faster than anticipated. The question was how much to share, how much to hold back. Before we discuss cooperation, Chen said carefully, we need to understand your motivation. Are you here because the Vraxi Collective wants to improve its capabilities, or because individual Vraxi want to survive what's coming? Zekthal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Both. The council is fragmenting. The Kulathi are mobilizing fleets under the pretense of defensive repositioning. The Threnodi are making overtures to species outside council space. And there are rumors. Old species, isolationist empires that haven't been heard from in millions of years, are taking notice of recent events. The galaxy is about to become a much more dangerous place. Because we broke the council's monopoly on power, Okonkwo said. It wasn't a question. Because you proved it could be done, Zekthal replied. For 1 billion years, young species looked at the council and saw an insurmountable wall. Now they see a structure with cracks. Some of them have grievances far more serious than humanity's. Some of them have been waiting for this moment for eons. Chen stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the shipyard where human vessels were taking shape. Sleek, deadly designs that bore little resemblance to the ceremonial warships of the council races. So the galaxy's old order is collapsing, and you want humanity to help you navigate the chaos we created. The irony is almost poetic. We understand if you bear us ill will, Zekthal said quietly. The Vraxi advised the council to approve the quarantine order. We believed humanity's aggressive tendencies made them a threat to galactic stability. We were not entirely wrong, but we failed to consider that aggression directed at survival is different from aggression directed at conquest. That's a fancy way of saying you miscalculated, Okonkwo observed. Yes, we did, and now we're asking for a chance to learn from our mistake. Zekthal pulled up a holographic display showing a sector of space far beyond council territory. There's a species here called the Kreshtak. They've been isolationist for 3 million years, ever since the council tried to incorporate them. They possess technology that makes ours look primitive. If they see the council's weakness as an opportunity, they'll come looking for payback, Chen finished. And you think humanity's experience fighting against superior technology will be useful? I think humanity's experience surviving against impossible odds will be essential, Zekthal corrected. The Council's military doctrine is built on the assumption that superior force wins conflicts. Your species proved that assumption false. If the Kreshtak move, we'll need every advantage we can get, including the ability to think like a species that spent its entire existence as the underdog. Okonkwo turned to Chen. Your assessment, Ambassador? Chen was silent for a long moment, her eyes still fixed on the growing fleet outside. Finally, she spoke. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council tried to extinct us because they thought we were too dangerous to coexist with. Now they're begging us to help them survive the consequences of their own policies. There's a lesson here about short-term thinking and long-term survival. She turned back to face Zekthal. We'll cooperate, but on our terms. First, the Vraxi Collective formally recognizes human sovereignty over all our established colonies, and any new colonies we establish in unclaimed space. Second, you share your complete intelligence on the Kreshtak and any other potential threats. Third, any military cooperation is structured as a partnership between equals, not as the Council teaching primitive humans how to behave. And in return, Zekthal asked, in return we'll share some, not all, of our tactical innovations. We'll run joint training exercises, and if the Kreshtak or anyone else threatens Council space, humanity will fight alongside you, not for the Council's sake, but because destabilization helps no one, including us. She stepped closer to the Vraxi commander. But understand this, humanity is never going back in the box. We're a galactic power now, whether anyone likes it or not. We'll be reasonable, we'll be diplomatic, but we will not be subordinated. The galaxy needs to accept that there's room for different approaches to civilization, different ways of thinking, different strategies for survival. If you can accept that, we can work together. If not, she shrugged, then you're on your own when the Kreshtak come calling. Zekthal's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as a sigh. The Vraxi Collective accepts your terms. And for what it's worth, Ambassador, I believe you're correct. The galaxy does need different perspectives. We've been solving the same problems the same ways for so long that we've forgotten how to innovate. Perhaps that's why a species as young as yours has proven so disruptive. Disruptive, Okonkwo chuckled. That's one word for it. My grandfather would have used a few others. Your grandfather? Zekthal tilted his head curiously. He was a historian of the late 21st century on Earth. Used to say that humanity's greatest strength was our refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Show a human a wall, he'd say, and they'll find a way over it, under it, around it, or through it. Tell them it can't be done and they'll do it out of spite. Chen laughed. A real laugh, the first Okonkwo had heard from her in months. Out of spite. That might be the most accurate description of human psychology I've ever heard. We fought an entire galactic council because they told us we couldn't. And won, Zekthal added. Don't forget that part. You won. We survived, Chen corrected. There's a difference. Winning implies the conflict is over. But this? She gestured at the space around them, at the galaxy beyond. This is just the beginning. The Council's old order is dying and we have no idea what will replace it. There will be more conflicts, more threats, more species trying to carve out their place in whatever comes next. Which brings us back to why we're here, Zekthal said. The Vraxi want to be prepared for that future. We want to learn how to adapt, how to innovate, how to survive in a galaxy that's no longer predictable. Okonkwo stood and extended his hand, a human gesture that Zekthal had clearly been briefed on, because he reached out with his primary manipulator to clasp it. Then let's get started. We have a lot of work to do, and from what you've told us, not much time to do it in. As the Vraxi delegation left to begin coordinating with human military planners, Chen and Okonkwo remained in the observation deck, watching the stars. Do you think they understand what they're really asking for? Chen asked quietly. They're asking us to teach them how to be afraid, Okonkwo replied. How to fight without certainty of victory. How to make decisions when all the options are bad. How to keep going when logic says you should surrender. They're asking us to share the lessons we learned in our darkest hours. And we're going to do it. We have to. Because if we don't and the Kreshtak or someone like them shows up, we'll all end up extinct. Better to have allies who understand how to fight a losing battle and turn it into a winning one. Chen nodded slowly. You know what the strangest part of all this is? 6 months ago, we were the ones who were supposed to learn from the galaxy's elder races. They were the wise ones, the civilized ones, the ones who had figured it all out. Now they're coming to us for answers. Maybe that's the real lesson here, Okonkwo suggested. There are no wise elder races. There are just survivors who got lucky, who happened to evolve in peaceful circumstances and convinced themselves that their peace was wisdom rather than fortune. We survived in chaos, so we learned to thrive in it. Now that chaos is coming to the galaxy, we're the ones with relevant experience. God help us all, Chen murmured. He might, Okonkwo replied, but I suspect we'll have to help ourselves. We usually do. 3 months after the Vraxi partnership was announced, Dr. Sarah Volkova found herself back in the archives of war, but this time she wasn't alone. A class of 30 students, the first graduating class of the newly established Galactic Strategic Studies program, sat before her. Their faces a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. They were the future, these young officers and diplomats. Born on a dozen different human colonies, they represented a humanity that had never known the timidity of the pre-contact era. They had grown up knowing that humans were players on the galactic stage, not supplicants begging for acceptance. Today, Volkova began, we're going to talk about the 6 months that changed the galaxy. Not the tactics we used, not the technology we deployed, you've studied all that. We're going to talk about why it worked, why a species that had been among the stars for barely 300 years managed to force a civilization 1 billion years, old to back down. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the Galactic Council before and after the crisis. The before image showed a monolithic structure, unified and seemingly impregnable. The after image showed a spiderweb of fracturing alliances, competing interests, and emerging power blocks. Anyone want to venture a guess? A young lieutenant from the Mars colonies raised her hand. We were willing to go further than they were. We had less to lose, so we could take bigger risks. Partially correct, Volkova acknowledged. But the Council had everything to lose, their entire civilization. They should have been more motivated, not less. Anyone else? A cadet from Proxima spoke up. We thought differently. They'd been doing things the same way for so long that they couldn't imagine alternatives. Closer, Volkova said, but still not the complete answer. Let me tell you a story. In the early 21st century, there was a game called chess that had been played by humans for over 1,000 years. The best human players could defeat most opponents using pattern recognition and memorize strategies. Then someone taught a computer to play chess not by memorizing patterns but by exploring possibilities. The computer could consider moves that no human grandmaster would think of because they violated standard chess theory. And it won, not because it was smarter but because it wasn't constrained by tradition. She let that sink in for a moment. The Galactic Council is like those grandmasters. They have 1 billion years of experience, countless conflicts analyzed and optimized. They know the right way to conduct warfare. But we didn't. We looked at each situation and asked, well, what can we do? Instead of, what should we do according to established doctrine? Another cadet, this one from Europa Station, spoke up. But doesn't that make us dangerous? If we're willing to break all the rules, what's to stop us from going too far? It was the question Volkova had been waiting for. An excellent question, and one that the galaxy is asking about us right now. The answer is that rules and ethics aren't the same thing. The Council confused following protocols with being civilized. They thought that if everyone fought according to their billion-year-old playbook, warfare could be controlled, civilized, made safe. But warfare is never safe. That's a contradiction in terms. She changed the display to show human history, not the wars, but the aftermath. The Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II. The international laws developed to prevent genocide. The nuclear treaties that pulled humanity back from the brink. Here's what makes humanity different, and it's not our willingness to break rules. It's our understanding that rules are tools, not sacred texts. When the rules serve peace and survival, we follow them. When they become obstacles to survival, we change them. But, and this is crucial, we don't throw out ethics in the process. We don't commit genocide, we don't target civilians, we don't torture prisoners. Not because some protocol says we shouldn't, but because we've learned from our own dark history that those actions poison the future. A young diplomat from Luna raised her hand. Dr. Volkova, how do we make the galaxy understand that? They see us as unpredictable, dangerous. How do we convince them we can be trusted? Volkova smiled sadly. We don't, not with words anyway. We show them through our actions. Every time we have the opportunity to be cruel and choose restraint, we build trust. Every time we could exploit our advantages and choose cooperation instead, we prove we're not monsters. It'll take time, maybe centuries. But humans are good at playing the long game when we need to. She pulled up one final display, this one showing a message that had been recorded 6 months ago, but was only now being made public. Ambassador Chen's face appeared. But this wasn't the hard-edged diplomat who had faced down the Council. This was someone speaking to her own people, her expression vulnerable and honest. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, the recorded Chen said. By the time you see this, you'll know what happened at New Hebrides and the other engagement sites. You'll know that humanity took a stand against extinction and won. Some of you will celebrate, proud that we proved ourselves against the galaxy's elder races. Others will worry about what we've become, whether we've sacrificed our principles for survival. I want to tell you why we did what we did, and more importantly, why we did it the way we did it. We could have destroyed the Zothic fleet. We had the capability. We chose not to because killing them would have made us into what the Council accused us of being. A violent, aggressive species that solves problems through destruction. Instead, we humiliated them. We showed them that their assumptions about warfare were outdated, that their technology wasn't invulnerable, that their protocols were a liability rather than an asset. Was it brutal? Yes, war always is. But we gave them a choice that traditional warfare doesn't offer. The choice to learn from defeat without dying from it. Every crew member on those disabled ships lived to return home, to tell their families about the humans who could have killed them but didn't. That's the message we wanted to send. Not we can destroy you, but we can defeat you, and we'll still let you walk away. Some will say that's weakness. that we should have pressed our advantage, made an example that would terrify any future aggressors. But terror is a poor foundation for lasting peace. Respect, grudging, uncomfortable respect, that's what builds alliances that survive beyond the immediate crisis. We're at a crossroads now. The galaxy sees us as disruptors, unpredictable elements in a billion-year-old equation. They're not wrong. We are disruptive. We do think differently, but disruption isn't the same as destruction. We're not here to tear down the galactic order. We're here to evolve it, to push it towards something that accommodates different species, different philosophies, different approaches to survival. To my fellow humans, I say this. What we did in those 6 months will echo across the galaxy for millennia. We proved that humanity can fight when we must, but we also proved that we can show mercy when we have the power to destroy. That second part is just as important as the first. Maybe more important, the galaxy is changing. Old alliances are fracturing, new ones are forming, and we're at the center of it all. It's tempting to see ourselves as conquerors, as the species that rewrote the rules and came out on top. But that's not who we are, and it's not who we should become. We're survivors, yes. We're adaptable, innovative, willing to do whatever it takes to see tomorrow. But we're also capable of compassion, of cooperation, of building instead of just breaking. The other side of humanity, the side the Council demanded to see, isn't just our capacity for warfare. It's our capacity to wage war and still choose peace when the guns fall silent. That's the real lesson we need to teach the galaxy. Not that we can fight, but that we know when to stop fighting. The future is uncertain. There are threats out there we haven't faced yet, challenges we can't predict. But I believe with everything I am that humanity is ready for whatever comes. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because we're the most adaptable. We learn, we change, we survive. And now, we make sure the galaxy survives with us. The recording ended, leaving the classroom in thoughtful silence. Finally, the lieutenant from Mars spoke. That's a lot of responsibility. Making sure the galaxy survives? How are we supposed to do that? Volkova looked at each of her students in turn. The same way humanity has always dealt with impossible challenges. One day at a time, one problem at a time, one ethical choice at a time. You're the generation that will shape what comes next. The question isn't whether you'll face impossible challenges, you will. The question is what kind of people you'll be when you face them. She walked to the window, looking out at Earth rising above the lunar horizon. We showed the galaxy the other side of humanity, and it terrified them. Now we need to show them the rest of what we are. The side that builds communities on lifeless worlds, that explores the unknown because we're curious rather than because we want to conquer, that extends a hand to former enemies because we understand that yesterday's foe might be tomorrow's ally. And if they refuse our hand? Asked the cadet from Proxima. Volkova turned back to face her students, and in her expression was the accumulated weight of human history. All its triumphs and tragedies, all its nobility and barbarity, all its potential for both destruction and creation. Then we survive anyway, because that's what humans do. But we never stop offering, never stop trying to build bridges instead of burning them. The moment we stop trying is the moment we become the monsters the Council feared we might be. She dismissed the class, but as they filed out, each student seemed to carry themselves a little differently, with the weight of responsibility, yes, but also with pride. They were the inheritors of a legacy that had just redefined what was possible in a billion-year-old galaxy. As the last student left, Volkova returned to the archives of war, to the files and records of humanity's darkest hours. But now, mixed among them were new files, accounts of mercy shown to defeated enemies, of restraint chosen in moments of power, of humans who had every right to seek vengeance and chose reconciliation instead. The archives of war were becoming something else, something that no Galactic Council database contained, the archives of survival, where the lessons weren't just about how to defeat enemies, but how to transform them into something that wasn't enemies anymore. It would take time, maybe centuries, but humanity had time now. They'd earned it, one humiliated fleet at a time, one shocked council session at a time, one impossible victory at a time. The galaxy had demanded to see the other side of humanity, and humanity had obliged. But the galaxy was still learning that humanity had more than two sides. They were complex, contradictory, capable of breathtaking violence and equally breathtaking compassion, sometimes within the same breath. And that complexity, more than any weapon or tactic, was what would reshape the galaxy in humanity's image, not through conquest but through example. One day, one choice, one act of defiant hope at a time. Outside the window, Earth continued its eternal rotation, indifferent to the grand dramas playing out among the stars. But on that world and on a dozen colonies beyond, humans were going about their lives, working, loving, building, dreaming, carrying within them the same contradictions that had just redefined galactic politics. They were warriors and peacemakers, pragmatists and dreamers, survivors and builders. They were humanity in all its messy, contradictory, impossible glory, and the galaxy would never be the same. End author's note. This story explores the classic HFY theme of humanity's unique characteristics, but with a focus on restraint and strategic thinking rather than pure military might. The message is that humanity's true strength lies not just in our capacity for violence, but in our choice to pair that capacity with mercy, adaptability with ethics, and survival instinct with hope for a better future.